ordinance 2022-14, introduction, approving the agreement of sale for 26 Wentworth Lane. May I hear a motion? I will move. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Maggie. And Mr. White is going to present on this item. Thank you.
Yes, and while I'm getting set up, so as we're all well aware, the new audio technology has been installed, and we're all enjoying the beeps. We've asked the manufacturer on if there's a way to mute those, or so stay tuned on that. The other element, I think Molly had sent an email earlier tonight. Just close that. So some of the control features that
So while he's talking about that, let's talk about Garrett Hill.
Sends us
No one
these,
on the Board of
projectors.
Commissioners remembers the last time Garrett Hill had to stand up and defend themselves.
So,
I do remember.
Until then, these types of
And this
presentations
seems
from the
like
administration
something
have
that's
to
pretty
happen.
shady ass, if you ask
The good
me.
old-fashioned 1980s RBG cable. So let me just step into this really quickly. This ordinance proposes that the township would acquire the property at 26 Wentworth.
Aren't
and
parts of
the
Wentworth a
goal
private road, or isn't all of it a
acquiring
private
that
road?
Property is to address public parking.
Oh, so they're going to give off-campus students parking? That's so nice.
This is not a long presentation. I just got a couple slides. We're going to touch on the specific area, describe the problem that we're trying to solve, how this will be funded, and what the next steps look like. So the area that we're looking at is in Garrett Hill. Here's Conestoga. Here's Garrett Avenue.
Behind Garrett Pizza, Garrett Hill
We've got
Pizza.
Wentworth here, and the property in question is immediately behind the commercial establishment.
They're going to pave paradise and put up a parking lot.
So that's where the property's at.
That's where the property is. Gosh, remember when managers
so
used English?
In the
That was
last
standard.
2.5 years, it has been a consistent theme in this area of the township where parking is a problem. The most obvious issue is that all of the parking there is private. And there's not a lot of land, not a lot of space. So with no
What about
public
stormwater
parking,
management if they do
we
this?
do not have the ability to use shared parking, which is a lot of what is used in the Wayne area to help those businesses out. Being that you have both restaurant and retail use there in Garrett Hill, that demands higher parking in our zoning codes. And again, without a lot of space and public parking, it's difficult for those establishments to satisfy those zoning requirements. What this is aimed at is well, let me back up even further. So as these discussions have matured over the last couple of years, and it kind of came to a head this spring when we were experiencing regular towing issues, folks going to pick up dinner and
Is that
parking in
because
front of
a
another
private
establishment
person
that would
was
get towed,
having
because they were
cars
parked
towed?
in private parking. So we started brainstorming different ideas that might help address this issue. We had talked in various conversations about options. One of the options was approaching the business owner, Mr. Bages, across the street with his commercial development if there was an opportunity for shared parking there. That discussion was had. It's not a feasible outcome. But what did come out of that conversation is, given the private parking that's on Williams, if there was an opportunity to buy the Wentworth property, you would have a large parking field that kind of connected those two properties behind the commercial establishments. So,
But how do you get in and out of that?
as
Isn't there
timing and fate would
residential
have
there?
it, the Wentworth property was in a state of flux. So we reached out to the current owner of the property and asked if there was any possibility he'd be willing to sell that to the township for the purpose of adding public parking there. And they were. Rockwell was open to the concept. They have worked with us to get us to this point, which is the ordinance that's in front of the board now. to
Wait.
acquire the property,
Did a developer develop an ordinance too?
to address or to install a parking field there. This is a sketch that we had our engineers, Garrett Fleming, prepare for us. At this time, it just contemplates the Wentworth property as its own standalone lot. We've also talked about trying to combine it with the private lot next door, either making it all public if the owner of that property was willing to do so, or just joining them to improve traffic flow. Those are the next conversations that we'll need to finalize and obviously bring back to the board. But as proposed tonight, if this were to be just this property by itself, it would accommodate 17 public parking spots and provide immediate parking relief to all of the commercial establishments right next door.
But what happens to the residents? Do they lose parking if a parking lot?
In terms of pricing and funding,
Goes
there's two different elements here. The ordinance that's in front of the board tonight is for the land acquisition at $573,000. The funding proposal there is to use general fund reserves today. Obviously, this is an introduction tonight. The adoption would be considered after a public hearing on September 12th. At that time, we would also, Mr. Tate is working with bond counsel on a reimbursement resolution, which is, for those commissioners that have been with us for a few years, you might recall the reimbursement resolution gives us the opportunity at a future date, if we were to borrow money, to reimburse ourselves for an expense incurred in the past. So it's basically the commissioners making its intent known that you intend to reimburse the general fund for that acquisition at some point in the future. If and when that day comes, our financial position dictates that it's not necessary, then you don't do it. So really, that reimbursement resolution just provides the board with a little bit more financial flexibility. Again, if and when we have a future borrowing we would add the 573 to that borrowing and then reimburse the general fund. The second component is the actual lot construction. If the board approves the purchase of the land, shortly thereafter, we would be back to the board asking for permission to engage the engineers to do an actual design. They would take that sketch and turn it into a set of engineered plans. And then we'd look to fund the actual parking lot installation then in the early parts of next year, with the understanding it'll take the engineers a little bit of time to engineer things or to put those plans together. So in terms of next steps, what we would like to do is the time in between tonight and the public
But did
hearing
all the
on September
neighbors
12th is
get a
do
mailing?
direct mailing to
For
the
example,
neighbors
did Conestoga
that
Pizza
outlines
across the
what
road get a
proposal
mailing?
is, and offer them an opportunity to meet with us, ask questions, and get an idea of again what the plan is, and then get input on buffering, traffic flow, those types of neighborhood specific questions that we can incorporate into
Stormwater management,
what we
anyone?
ask the engineers to put together, and that will include talking with the commercial establishments and the residential neighbors in that area. So if introduced tonight, that'll be the next step. Then we would come back on the 12th of September
Better wake
for
up,
the
Garrett
public
Hill.
hearing and consider the adoption. Then in October, we would come back to the board with the final parking options. Hopefully at that point we'll have something to come back to the board definitive on whether we're joining the other property, if there's other arrangements that might be possible there or not. At least then we would
Hey,
have
why
a
don't you
plan
just
and we can
pave
ask
all
the
of
board
Garrett
for
Hill?
authorization to engage
Excellent.
the engineers to put the design together. And then the rest of the plan just follows through on including the parking lot with next year's budget. Then early part of next year, we're going out to bid once the engineering's done. And then, when the ground thaws, begin the construction and installation of the parking lot. And that's it. So happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. I would.
Since
first
when does
like
the
to just,
manager get up to the podium to do a presentation? I thought managers have their own desks.
Solution to a problem that I think we all know, whether or not you live in Garrett Hill.
God, she's
or
like Molly
if you
Monotone, isn't
go
she?
to places in Garrett Hill if you don't live there. So really appreciate the effort that you and staff have put into it.
Oh, rah, 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 pat on the back. That's enough of an excerpt for you.